There we go. I think we're good.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Thursday, December 15th, 2022 Board of Health meeting. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded by video and audio, and those of you who are joining us remotely, please raise your hand and speak clearly when you are called upon. First, public comment. Is there anything that's not on the agenda that anybody would like to talk about? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the director's report. And actually, Roberto's not here today to give that. John's running that part of the meeting, and I think we have something that Meredith would like to talk about.
Sure, yeah. As I found out at the pharmacy that there's been a lot of medicines going around, which I joked with our local pharmacists about, job security with all that stuff flying off the shelves, but if you want to talk about it.
I just think that the town, either the town or the hospital needs to think about releasing the numbers of how many cases of influenza there's been, because I think that it is a lot bigger than what people think, and people are getting really sick, and there's not, I think the rate of vaccines is much lower. I was looking at the state data, and the state data for children is significantly lower than it has been in the last few years. The number of kids that have gotten vaccinated was like around 40% this year, and other years it's been significantly higher. I know locally our vaccine rate, at least in the schools, is a lot lower for the flu vaccine. And we have a lot of kids out with the flu, and I think there's a lot more cases in the town than people realize. And so I'm not sure how we can do that, but I think that we need more vaccine clinics, and maybe trying to do some drive up and releasing the numbers like they did with COVID to sort of give people an idea, because
Right,
I don't think people realize how rampant it is right now.
right, yeah. Well, I'll speak to Roberto about that.
And
about how
there's
we
not a
feel
lot of
about that.
Tamiflu.
Apparently, according to the local pharmacist, it's been flying off the shelves, that's for sure.
Yet kids are getting really sick and missing a week, 2 weeks of school. Because they keep having fevers or coughing. So I do think we need to urge people to get the flu vaccine and get tested if they're sick to see if they have it, because if they have it and they can take Tamiflu, the Tamiflu can really
Yeah,
make a difference.
There's no shortage of flu vaccine. Okay.
No. I don't think so. I just think it's a lot harder because you have to schedule an appointment and then go into the hospital, rather than in years past when they've had the drive up. You just drive up, you get your shot, you keep on with your day, and it's a lot easier. And it's just more cumbersome to have to call and make an appointment or do it on your phone. I mean, I don't think it's hard, but I just think it is a step that people aren't taking.
Is there a formal recommendation the board can make just to really kind of make it? I mean, it's important, but is there something we can do in terms of saying that it really, we want something to happen as a board?
right.
That's new to me, but it just seems it's important.
I mean, the COVID numbers are going up and RSV is out there too, but at least you can at least make some kind of a difference if you have your flu shot.
Yeah.
Your risk is a lot lower of getting the flu and getting really sick from the flu.
Okay, yeah, I can talk to Roberto about this. Hopefully he's back in tomorrow. And, we can chat about that, but that's a good point.
Thanks. Directors, review of the minutes, November 17th. Any additions or changes? Can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, next, release of a loan for tax collector's request at 8 Main Ave.
We have no objections to this. So I don't have much information about that besides briefly talking to Roberto saying that he didn't have a problem with it, so.
Okay, yeah, I think the property has changed hands, and that's why it's gonna be released. I get a motion to approve the release of the loan.
So.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, Chairman says aye. Okay, back to variance request for 26 North Shore Way, the night ring loading continuation.
So yeah, this is just the continuation from the discussion from last month's meeting, and I think Don's here to speak about it in person this time.
This is where I should stand, I guess.
It'll pick you up when you talk.
Oh, okay. For the record, Don Bracken, civil engineer for Bracken Engineering. Also with me tonight, representing the owners as well as Attorney Kevin Dale. I just want to start off with a quick recap. Since the last meeting, we did go over the plan and some of the details, but just to sort of re-summarize it. We have a 30,700 square foot lot that has an existing 3-bedroom dwelling on it. The proposal is to construct a cottage with 1 bedroom, increasing the flow from 3 bedrooms to 4 bedrooms. Obviously, that requires a new septic system and upgrade. We've designed a IA system using the Septitech system. And we've designed the location of the soil absorption system as far as possible from the nearest downstream well, which is on the property to the south of us, the abutment to the south. So the request was either for one or two things. Really weren't sure if a variance was applicable here. So we asked for both an exemption request and or a variance request to the wall protection zone requirements in the Board of Health Regulations, section 386-4. So those regulations require any septic system to be 300 feet if it's upgrading of a well. As I mentioned, we can't get the 300 feet within the confines of this lot. We can get it about 172 feet away. The design with the current flow all complies with Title V. So what we're here to discuss is specifically the local regulations dealing with the well protection zone. And also section 386-7 for relief procedure for pre-existing lots. That's in the well regulations. As I explained last time, it's always been our interpretation that if you have a lot that meets the requirements of 386-7, which our lot does, I don't think there's any question with that. Then you can design a system and get an exemption from this 300-foot setback, as long as you maximize the distance that you can from the well in question, which I think we've demonstrated we've done. We have the system as far from the well in question, as close to the property line as we can get it. So I think with that, unless you have any questions on the design itself, I'll probably turn it over to Mr. Dale at this point.
Here is the existing septic. I'm just looking at that.
Oh, great. I'm glad you put this up. The existing septic is right here.
And where is the well that it,
This is the well in
and
question.
how far away is that?
So right now it's 124 feet to the existing system, and it's going to be 172 feet to where we're proposing it. So you can see we're getting it a decent amount further away from where the existing system is.
Is that the well that we're in question? Is that the 26 North Shaw's well or a neighbor's well?
It's the neighbor's well to the south. This one right here at 24. Our own well, we actually applied for a well permit. We received the well permit because our existing well is right up against the house. We're going to put a new well further back. And you can see by this heavy line, we show it heavy for a proposed well. So this is the protection zone for the new well. And so the groundwater is flowing in this direction. So we call these pill shapes because they look like pills. And you can see because of the density of the neighborhood and the size of the lots, all these pill shapes that are around this neighborhood. So this is one pill shape here, and this is another pill shape. And you can see there are other neighboring septic systems also within some of the pill shapes. And, you know, the other benefit here is with the upgrade, even though we're adding a bedroom, when you do the nitrogen loading calculations, there'll be less nitrogen loading going into the ground with the new IE system. So
Is the neighbor's well down gradient from the proposed septic field?
yes, it's right here.
Yeah, so I
So
mean,
this
that's
is
the
the
flow,
grade-
that's
this
the
is the-
flow of the water.
That's the flow. And again, this is the existing system, which is much closer than what we're proposing now.
Have the neighbors respond, you know, again, I'd like to notify, have they responded saying they support this?
Well, the neighbors haven't been notified. This isn't like a certain Title V regulations require about a notification. This isn't one of them.
So they don't know that their system is that close to someone's septic field.
Well, I mean,
It
I would,
already is.
I think we have to assume that if they've lived there, you know, if they were interested in that, it would be easy enough for them to find out where neighboring septic systems are.
That's not what people do though.
Well,
A lot of
I mean,
times. Yeah, that's my concern. Has, like, so has the neighbors been, you know, could the builder propose to maybe help have the neighbor move their well to pay for that, just so to get a greater distance? I'm concerned, you know, obviously my before,
Yeah.
I'm concerned about contamination. I know about the nitrogen loading and I'm concerned about contamination. Once it's contaminated, that's it.
But they're
And-
moving it further away than it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, to potentially to have the neighbor, have the builder, the 26 people pay for their neighbor's well to be moved. As part of it, I'm just, you know, trying to get more distance.
Yeah, well, maybe you should explain to them what the minimum distance is by Title V.
yeah, the minimum is 100 feet.
Mhm.
So, I think the 300 feet is very conservative, obviously, and I think in this case where we have 172 feet. You know, that's substantially more than what the minimum is.
And did we get last meeting, we talked about getting town opinion possibly on, you know, is this the proper application of this regulation in terms of wells and septic fields? And were we able to get any kind of an opinion about, is this the proper application of this regulation?
Did you speak with Roberto? That was my impression that.
No, yeah, I stopped in and so you,
Okay.
Roberto out of the office, so
Okay,
I didn't
okay,
talk.
all right, that was the last.
Yeah, I haven't talked to him.
We haven't received, I mean, unless the board really wants to make a motion to request the clarification from town council. I mean, we haven't gotten any legal clarification of it from last meeting.
So I'm confused. This is a this or that application. And I know that there's some exception, right? That's granted to this lot. The question we had last time was, does new construction fall under that exception? And that was sort of the thing we were debating, and and my understanding is historic practice, this board has permitted new construction to be done within that exception. So I'd love maybe from you, Mr. Dale, through the chair.
Yeah,
An explanation of the difference between that exception and which is one method and then the variance is the other method. Is that correct? So I'd love some more clarity
yeah,
from the chair.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Dale. I know some of you, but not all of you. I'm an attorney. I represent the applicant and owner, AF12 LLC. And I had the good fortune to view the Zoom meeting of November 17th, where the board addressed this issue and noted that some of the members of the board, Ms. Moore and others, want to get a little better sense of history here and grandfathering and how this regulation came about and how it's been interpreted over time. I came here in 1981. I was formerly chairman of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I've been an active real estate attorney and permit attorney for more than 40 years. And I've practiced before the Board of Health, Select Board. Was quite familiar with the exemption that was enacted in 1990 that provided for relief from the 300-foot separation requirement. My recollection was that in the 1980s, Horsley Witten did a groundwater study on Nantucket, and people raised concerns about our sole source aquifer and protecting our groundwater. And my memory is that that stimulated people to begin to think about passing Board of Health regulations that would protect groundwater. And in 1990, the board did so. But at that time, there was, I say, a fair amount of concern about smaller, improved lots that couldn't meet the 300-foot separation requirement. Many of these lots were in Surfside, some in Matticat. There was a lot of discussion about that. And that was some of the background for the exemption, the relief exemption for pre-existing lots. Now, over time, the Board of Health granted these exemptions. I want to stress this to both vacant and improved lots. And I think that I don't have all the data, but for the past almost 30 years, most of the lots that received the exemption were improved lots, not vacant lots. And Don Bracken has compiled a chart that's attached to my letter, did the research and looked at 17 lots from 2006 to 2018 that received this pre-existing lot exemption. And of the 17, 12 were improved lots. So my first point is that the suggestion that this exemption only applies to vacant lots doesn't hold up. If you look at the practice of the Board of Health for the past 30 years. The second thing I want to emphasize is, not emphasize, just note that in 2004, Select Board wanted another look at both septic system and well regulations. And I was appointed chairman of the August Septic System Work Group. And there were another number of Nantucketers, some of whom you might know. I think the chairman knows one of them. His name was Don Visco, Mike Bachman, Richard Ray, Peggy Fantozzi, who used to be administrator of the Conservation Commission, Cormac Collier from the Land Council. And we met over the winter and came up with new regulations that addressed the Harbor Watershed District and inspections that were required. And we also looked at the well regulations. And my memory is that the work group was very supportive of the relief procedure, the exemption procedure for both improved and vacant lots. There was no, as I recall, no contention about that. That was accepted. That was the accepted practice on Nantucket. And as I mentioned earlier, since that time, 2004, I believe most of the exemptions were granted to improved lots, not vacant lots. Mr. Bracken's research indicates that from his files. I suspect, and I'm not guessing here, I suspect it's true that if you talk to Paul Santos at Nantucket Surveyors, or if you talk to Dan Malloy, the off-island engineer, they would confirm that most of these exemptions were for improved lots where existing houses increased their flow by adding more square footage or bedrooms. And that exemption was granted not by a variance, but by the Board of Health staff. As long as the application indicated that the property complied with Title V, like this one. And I don't want to confuse things. Some people talk about maximum feasible distance. This well regulation, it's not a Title V regulation, it's a well regulation, talks about maximum attainable distance or greatest distance you can have, different terms really. And I think when I watched the Zoom meeting last time, my sense was there might have been some confusion between the way terms are used under Title V and the way they are used in our local well regulations. And I think that it's important to distinguish between the two, not for the ultimate goal here. And I appreciate the concern about contamination. You know, I think that's a valid concern. But if a regulation, at least the way I've been educated and practiced, if there's legislative history that indicates how a regulation has been interpreted, and there's actual experience on how a regulation has been applied for 30 years, that should govern how the regulation is applied today. And of course, if the Board of Health in its wisdom thought, well, maybe we only want vacant lots to get this exemption, or maybe we should not have this exemption, it seems to me the proper procedure is to amend the regulations, but not to ignore what the practice has been. So Don Bracken is the technical guy. He knows everything. I know something about the legislative history. My memory's not what it used to be, but it's still pretty good. And I would say in sum, this is a net benefit for the lot. It's going to lower the amount of nitrogen because of the AI system. The actual septic system is going to be farther away from the closest well on the neighboring lot than it is right now. So I think it fits under the rubric of what should get an exemption from the Board of Health staff. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
In terms of, you say there might be, in terms of how language applies in different situations, what do you have any recommendations to suggest a kind of that language becomes same? Because again, this is just going to keep coming up, and what definitions, what means what, and how are things defined so that we get consistency of interpretation. Look over here, it's interpreted one way, look over here, it can be interpreted another. Any suggestions that kind of how that can be brought together?
Well, one is, I think it's important to distinguish between regulations, what they're enacted to do. I mean, Title V regulations are enacted to do certain things. And Title V uses the term maximum feasible distance. I think primarily, and I'll defer to Don on this, for repairs to existing systems, so that people can repair an existing system. That's not the well regulation we're talking about. It's a different regulation. It talks about the distance between septic systems and wells. It's not talking about repairing septic systems. It's not a Title V regulation.
Right.
It's a well regulation, and more than that, it's a Nantucket well regulation. I don't think I may be wrong. I'm not sure any other communities in the Commonwealth have the 300-foot separation requirement like we do. And thinking back to when this regulation was enacted, that raised a lot of concern for people, especially people who owned lots in R10 zoning districts of about 20,000 square feet in size, where there's no feasible way for them to put another bedroom on when they had another child, because they couldn't meet the separation requirement. And that affected many lots in Mattocket. It affected a fair number of lots at Surfside and other parts of the island. So we have a local concern here, which in my view makes it a joy to live here and practice here, because we have our own ethos and culture on Nantucket that pays attention to things like, what about a family with a small lot that needs another bedroom? Should they be penalized, or is there a way for them to have it? And I think that's part of the logic of why this relief procedure was enacted back then. But your question's a good one. Distinguish between regulations, what they're trying to do. Don't use terms from one set of regulations in another regulation. And I'm always fully supportive of clarity, being succinct, and saying what you mean. Now, as I said, if the board really wanted to address this issue, seems to me you would amend the regulation, but not discard the 30-year interpretation.
And this is not adding just one bedroom. I mean, it's adding a bedroom, but it's adding another, it's not just adding like, we had another kid, we have to add a bedroom under a house. They're adding another cottage. Am I correct?
It's a
Yes,
freestanding
yes.
structure.
Right.
Yes.
I just think that's a little different than like, I need
Yeah.
another bedroom,
Yeah,
Well,
because it's not, it's another kitchen, it's another bathroom.
no, 1.5 deaths.
It's
Yeah.
more than,
with the well regulation at issue that we're talking about,
Right.
the exemption doesn't distinguish between another dwelling or another room. Maybe it should. I mean, that's my attitude. These are things that we need to discuss. Maybe they should be amended, but in terms of flow, as far as I know, the effect of a bedroom in a separate structure, a new house, or a bedroom in an existing house, in terms of flow, it's the same.
that was a new building would produce more. I mean, it's gonna have a kitchen. It's not just gonna be like a tent. It's gonna.
Title V right now strictly goes by the numbers.
Just bedrooms.
No,
So in
You're talking as a
reality,
practical matter.
right,
as a practical matter, it is more water going into a system because it's gonna have a kitchen and
well.
so.
But for the purpose,
Possibly, but really, what it comes down to is the number of people, when Title V was written. It was assumed that it was based on 55 gallons per person would be the flow. And that's how they came up with the 110 gallons per bedroom, assuming 2 people in every bedroom. So it really generates from the number of people. So you're right, if there's only one bedroom and it's assumed they have 2 people, they could be, in a larger structure in the house. But you're right, common sense would say, well, if there's another kitchen and this and that, you're probably gonna end up with more flow. But as of right now, that's never been, regulated in that way. And, in reality, even though it's a separate structure, flows are much less than it was predicted. I mean, the 55 gallons per person, I think, came from the 60s. You know what I mean? It's never changed, and plumbing has changed, and water use has changed, and so forth. So I think it now, the average flows are much less than that in most situations.
But during the summer, our water usage when it peaks indicates 100,000 people. Now, we know there's not 100,000 people on island, but obviously water usage per seems to be in the last couple of years. I mean, I think we've kind of gotten this little sharper curve in the last couple of years. And so the 55, though may be old for 60, may be not enough for now, especially some of the new constructions that we're doing that really are much more energy intensive and bigger and better. So,
Brooke has a question.
Yeah, so I think it's clear to me that this is not we shouldn't be discussing policy when we're talking about an application in front of us. We have a regulation that has a track record of interpretation and application that seems clear to me based on the history you've described, that Mr. Dale's described to me, that the discussion about the regulation doesn't talk about kitchens, it talks about bedrooms. We can't be applying things that don't exist in the regulation. That's not fair, and it's I don't believe it's our job. If we want to recommend reviewing the policy or the regulations and amending them in the future, but as far as I'm concerned, the only part that I'm confused about is the staff recommendation is negative, and it seems to me the application of this exemption would warrant approval. I don't understand whether staff is recommending a change in interpretation or whether there's something about this particular application that makes it different from the 17 others that have been approved. That would be the question I would want to
I
answer.
think some of that is new construction, right? The rules say if if it's gonna be new construction, then you have to go by the. That's where the change would be.
Mhm.
My question to you was, during that time period, those things, were they done case by case, or was it just across the board, they were all accepted?
The exemptions, the granting
Yes.
of exemptions?
Yes,
I think they were based on case-by-case applications where the staff, Martello, whoever was the staff at the Board of Health
Mhm.
would review each specific application to make sure that the distance was as far as it could be,
okay,
whether the exemption was granted. Isn't that your?
That, yeah,
okay.
exactly what it was.
I'm comfortable making a motion for approval based on the historic precedent of this. And, you know, whether we want to have a conversation about whether that's what should be happening going forward, whether that's the best interest of the community, that's another conversation for another day.
The only thing I would add is that the IA system would be limited to only one bedroom, one more bedroom.
That's all that they
That's all
could
it is.
possibly
Okay.
do. Yeah, if I guess I.
Yeah,
if I-
John.
Chance to speak. So I think the regulation is for wells, so, I mean, I'm trying to think of some example here, but I mean, I think the regulation pertains to where he's located this well now, so say, say this well failed that they had, and they needed to dig a new well, obviously, let's say it's more saturated, I guess, with soil absorption systems. Well, I think the regulation is to make this, to be the maximum distance possible from any pre-existing soil absorption systems in there. That's what the regulation is to me. When I think when you're an inspector, when you learn Title V, it's compliance, especially on new construction. And new construction is kind of like the big, you must comply then, you know, scenario. So it kind of works in conjunction that the soil absorption system now needs to be located in an area where it complies with Title V and local regulations. You know, again, this is a well regulation, so I think at the end of the day, you ask, when's enough for a lot? Yeah, I mean, when is enough for a lot? I mean, they get to keep going. I mean, if 1990s the, you know, the line in the sand, then that's it. I mean, I received this document pretty late in the day, and I just did some brief research. I mean, one of these properties I know is in a dome area, which the 300 feet doesn't pertain to. It's when it's on the highest point in the water,
Oh,
it's
okay.
shedding from all directions off.
I think that one might have been a combination dome
Okay,
in well area,
okay.
because I questioned that myself. I didn't
Okay.
do all the research myself.
Okay,
all I did,
okay.
but Yeah.
I noticed one on town water, so there was a well to the lot to the south, but I didn't see that shown on the plan, the 300 foot, so maybe they hooked up to town water on that one. I mean, look, we're here for the environment to look out for it and how this impacts these people's drinking water. I mean, if the precedent is set and that's what it is, and as I said, the line in the sand's 1990, then that's what it is, and we honor that, and it's clarified with us in the office. I just, you know, this is one bedroom, the next one might be 4. So I think it's just something to consider, you know, as you said, Brooke, if it's a regulation we need to discuss, that's not really what's on the table with this particular thing that's on the agenda, so.
We did have a stipulation, in some of these things that the well would be tested. I forget what it was. Didn't we do, we agreed with some, they said. Specifically, if they had the well tested every 2 years,
There's a regulation.
I thought we did have something like that. No, okay.
Don't we have a well testing? Kind of, we're supposed to, I think every 2 years, I think we're supposed to. Get our well tested.
Well, the
Every
every
year?
year.
But
Every
but
year?
in this case, the well in question is not their well, it's the neighbor's well.
Right, and that regulation would
Okay.
rely or depend on the well on their property,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, the bottom line is, this is me being moved farther from the well in question in
That's
this
true.
particular case, as
Yep.
you know. I think if it were the opposite, I might be having a different conversation.
Right.
Or have a different point of view on this. They're actually reducing the potential exposure. Right?
Right, yeah, it is
Yeah.
being moved farther away, and I think Mr. Bracken has done, looking at this plan the best he can do. It's, I mean, would it be okay if it moved the other way though, because it's pre-1990?
It's a
That's my
really good
question.
question. I mean, I think I just struggle making a policy shift for this like suddenly making a policy shift compared to how it had been applied, but the regulation had been applied before. That would be
Right.
my only concern. I mean, I think everybody else was okay, and now you're not, and I think that's
Right.
worthy of a bigger conversation than just denying a particular application. That's just my gut instinct
Right.
here.
Any other questions from Kevin or Dawn or John?
So I'll make a motion to approve as an exemption outlined in the regulation. That's where I think we should need to go here.
Okay, did I get a second?
I would. I would agree with her if. We can't just say go ahead, because we have to know what we're gonna do in the future. Are we gonna change the regulation, or what are we gonna do? Because if we say yes, then everyone that comes in after this person, we have to give them the same agreement
But
that we.
they've been giving people this exclusion.
Okay, well then,
All that.
that's fine, then I'll second the motion.
The changing, or if we want to revisit, to change the regulation, we'd have to, advertise, have a public hearing, and that's something maybe that we can do. At some point.
Right. Yeah.
So,
All right, then I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jim says aye.
No.
Carrie says no. So that passes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I would like to have that
So,
discussion.
yeah, I think when, I know on the phone it's moving further away, but I do think when it's new construction, they should. We're adding on it should happen some filing. I know, and it's making it better here, they're further away, so that's better for the neighbors, but I do think.
Well, the thing is, we've learned, since 1990s, we know more, and the islands are getting more concentrated, and so it might be time to update it. It just, time changes, we get better information, and there's more pressure on the ecosystem, so it might be time to look at it.
Right, when the IAs weren't really prevalent back in 1990
Yeah.
either, when
Yeah.
they were thinking about all this stuff. And don't forget that well regulation is just a local regulation. It's something that was very, proactive here,
Yeah,
which Nantucket always seems to be.
yeah, and, it may need some tweaking just to be able to protect what we do have, because again, single source aquifer is kind of either working or is not. So, and, are there tweaks we should do, and does, can we clear up the definition of new construction under these types of situations, and well versus septic? I mean, can we kind of get it so it works as a whole instead of piecing it apart and trying to redefine it each time?
I also think it's really dangerous to make a policy change based on one application in front of us, rather than having a chance to look at the unintended consequences of making, in essence, a policy change by one decision without understanding what the broad consequences are.
Yeah.
Because it may well leave a year-round family unable to add a bedroom when they have another child,
Yeah.
if we change the policy. So I just think
I do think it's different building a second dwelling
I-
versus.
I don't
adding a
disagree.
bedroom.
I don't disagree.
Those are very different.
And we could amend the regulation to clarify that.
So that changed that, using short-term rental numbers, that changed that from an 8 property to a 12 property. Essentially 50% increase in potential occupancy. That's 3 bedroom, the 3 bedroom plus 2 is 6 to 8, that's the main house. The construction is a new bedroom plus 2, so 2 plus 4, that's 12. I'm just using short-term regular, if we use those numbers about what occupancy is supposed to be, so that's a 50% increase in potential occupancy.
And
Then
you
one
know, the
bedroom
other
adds.
thing is just because you put an IA system in. When you say you're gonna build another house, okay, so that means they may have another washing machine, they have another shower, they have all this. And the funny thing is that you could have a 3-bedroom house, you can have 12 bathrooms in there.
Mhm.
And if you can do that sometime, there's 4 people in a bedroom, not 2. So you get tons of water going into the.
Right.
thing.
Yeah,
So
and
the IA system doesn't always solve all the problems.
And I don't want to undermine staff here. I know what you're getting at, and I know your concerns, and I'm wholly respectful of that. I'm just really kind of a stickler about process for change.
Yeah,
And that's really all I'm talking about here. So we could have put them off for months while we had some kind of discussion, but I didn't think that's necessary.
I understand. Yeah.
So,
But at least we brought up the issue of there's something to look at. I think
Yeah.
that- And that's kind of how I'm looking at it, just there really may be a need to upgrade and update what we have on the books, and does it work for the health of the community?
Yeah.
That's all.
30 years old.
Yeah. So.
Okay,
I think it's done.
we'll move on to the next item, which is ratify condemnation order on.
Not to stop you, but
Yeah.
we didn't take. In the beginning of the meeting, you didn't take who was there and who wasn't here. You need to do that? No. No, okay, good.
All,
I'm sure
all
Terry-
here.
No, I feel so, you know, me, I don't want. Someone to
So-
say the meeting was.
No. So condemnation, ratification of a condemnation order of 7 Square Rigger Road upstairs dwelling unit.
Yes, so Jake and I, we went to 7 Square Rigger Road back in September, was it?
Yeah.
On a complaint of some poor living conditions there. Plumbing wasn't working, I believe, at the time. So we went and inspected and found that to be the case, and gave them 24 hours to fix the plumbing. And also what we noticed there was some egress issues. There was a back deck. That was rickety and not structurally sound and everything. So they pulled a building permit with the building department. They fixed that, remedied everything. There was a few other outstanding items which we're following up on, which property owners are given certain periods of time, 30 days. Sometimes we're working with property owners, whether it's ordering windows or something, sometimes the logistics of living on the island to repair things. And so Jake still had a few items to follow up on this property. So we went back, knocked on the door and went inside. We found out there was no heat in the building. So they were just using a space heater. So Jake contacted the property owner and spoke with them. Said you had 24 hours to fix the heat, and that didn't happen. So
Didn't it say something about smoke detectors too?
sorry, yes, there was also smoke detectors, which I believe they did install. There's a number of, this property has a history to it as well. The floor is in bad shape in some areas. Some of the doors aren't real secure into the apartment. I think there was a room that was built off of the living room as an extra bedroom that doesn't meet the square footage requirement. So, but why we're here, why it was condemned was there's no heat in the building. So The property, I believe's being sold or under, okay, so it's being sold. And the current occupants had been evicted. We did find.
Just from the second floor.
Yes, yep, the first floor is a garage bays,
Oh, okay.
like commercial use. But we did find an occupant there, so we said told the property owner 24 hours or we have to condemn it, so.
So the new buyer is gonna take responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be condemned until we go back and, until they fix the heat, calls to come back and we, uncondemn, take it off, so, but I mean, bottom line is there's no heat in the building, so, and they're using a big space heater, which we're never happy to see, and I know the fire department is never happy to see that really at all, so.
Couple of questions. The eviction, was that the landlord evicted or they were evicted based on our,
That was through the
Okay.
landlord, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think
and then there
was
was someone else living there?
Yeah, there was, so the current property owner is selling it, so I think they're, they went through the eviction process and, in order to make this, ready to be sold.
And
So
is there a heating system and it's just not functional, or is there no heating system installed?
there is a heating system, it's just not working.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it needs a facelift, to put it nicely, so.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, can I get a motion to ratify the condemnation of 7 Square Rigger.
So moved.
All in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Anybody else have any topics or before we adjourn or?
I mean, housing's, I will say housing's been pretty bad lately, the past week or two especially, so. It's, we've been working with, the fire department and building department on one property in particular, but, with the fire department usually on a few others, I believe, so. Just trying to get people into compliance and safe living conditions, so. It's unfortunate that, these scenarios are popping up, but, it doesn't make it, right for people to live in unsafe conditions in the case of emergencies and fires and, as well as the fire department to respond to some of these issues to have to go into these buildings that aren't safe, so. That would be the report I would give, I guess, at this time.
Get your flu shot.
Yeah,
Get
Get your flu shot,
Schedule
sounds
time.
good.
update the regulation.
There are lots
Yeah,
of appointments
Find
available.
housing for everybody.
I just think
I realize it's an extra step, but at least there are appointments available. For a while, there weren't.
Well,
So,
the pharmacist joked with me, they said, John, how's the health on Nantucket? I said, fantastic, and she said, I don't think so.
not,
Because what's going on? Everybody's getting their, flu medicine and whatnot, so. Hopefully it's, people continue to get their vaccines and,
it's worse than I've seen it. Since before COVID.
wow, yeah.
So,
So,
Roberta, know we highly recommend something.
okay,
So we really would like, and we'll do what we can to help.
yeah, hopefully, whatever that involves,
Yeah,
the
I
state
mean,
or
whether it's just,
town
you know,
money,
like to the drive-through clinic, we'll go door to door and just tell people stick their arms out, or
Right.
whatever.
right? yeah.
hence the need to keep this building where it is for 3 more years.
Vaccine clinic.
Stuff like that, right? I would make a motion to adjourn if we're ready.
can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can make it to my
I don't know
granddaughter's
why. I don't know that this building's great.